Hello, this is Seth Raven. I'm CEO and chairman of the board of Rimini Street. Today, we're going to talk about IT cost optimization strategies for agile enterprises in the post-pandemic era. But I want to first thank you for coming to the presentation, and I'm sorry that I can't be there for you today in person. Unfortunately, as you know, the pandemic is a big challenge in the United States, and travel to Taiwan is just not possible at this time. But I do get to Taiwan on a regular basis, and I do look forward to a chance to being in front of all of you personally sometime in the future. We're going to talk today about ways that we can help get your enterprise through the crisis that's happening around the world and move you to a position to where you can be very successful going forward with all the challenges that the pandemic, as well as some other challenges that are taking place, such as trade, are happening around the world. So let's walk through, but first I want to start with an introduction as to what is Rimini Street and who are we and what we do for customers. What we do for customers is we provide software support and AMS services that replace the high costs of the vendor support model, as well as replacing AMS providers who may not provide a high value service for the money that you pay. Instead, what we provide is an integrated service that allows our customers to run their existing releases for years and years into the future without any required upgrades, and saving over 50% in annual support costs and even more when it comes to the total operations of their systems. And we can keep systems that you're running today running for 5, 10, 15 years or more into the future. Rimini Street operates in 27 different global offices across 100 different countries for our customers. And we've saved our clients nearly $5 billion in US dollar savings. We have over 1,300 people and signed over 3,700 clients, including 149 of the Fortune 500. So we've grown rapidly, including a 27% year-over-year growth, and we're public and traded on the NASDAQ exchange under the term RMNI. So we're really excited about the work that we do in Southeast Asia and across Greater China, including Taiwan, where we've been adding customers on a fast pace for years now as we build out those operations. We also service many customers of names that you're familiar with in the local market and across the entire region, including many, many brands that are household names in Taiwan. So let's talk about where we are as a business. Companies are generally being put into 3 different categories today. By industry, geography, and organization, different companies are experiencing different challenges. Some companies in our travel arena, in hospitality, tourism, are hit the hardest right now because we can't get planes in the air. We can't get hotels filled up, and even retail, very hard hit in a lot of areas. And you might see a 40 to 95% drop in revenue right now in those areas. There are other types of companies in the middle, in the 10 to 15% that are hit, but not hit so hard, but they're definitely paying a price because of changes and challenges in the local environment. And then there's businesses that are doing very well because of the issues. We see the stay-at-home companies, and I'm very happy to say and humbled that Rimini Street is one of those companies that's done very well during the pandemic and this terrible global health crisis that we're navigating. So if you're one of these 3 categories, it's important to know which one you're in and being very honest with yourself, because it has a lot of impact and decisions about what you're going to do to move your business forward. Next, it's important that everybody really understand what phase of business you're in today. Are you in survival mode, where you're just trying to figure out how do you keep your people? How do you get your business to survive? How do you make sure you don't go bankrupt? where you're having to cut costs drastically in order to match reduced revenues, to make sure that you're not bleeding to death in cash supply? Or are you in stabilization mode where you now have stabilized, you've done the cost cutting, you've stopped the loss of cash, you've now got your business at the right size where your revenues and your expenses have equaled out? And are you now trying to figure out, based on that new level of stabilization, how do you move your business forward? How do we grow our business in this environment? How do we take advantage of it? Or are you in a thrive environment now where you've done survive and you've stabilized and you've figured out how to work with this new world between COVID and trade challenges, regional challenges with China, all the issues that are happening in Southeast Asia? If you're taking a look and you're finding ways that your business can find competitive advantage in the marketplace under these conditions, or you've changed your business to take advantage of certain opportunities in this climate, then you are thriving. And that's where we want to get everybody to. So how do we get there? First, CIOs have a very critical role. They are part of the survive, stabilize, and thrive environment. Each phase, the CIO has a critical role. Many of you were involved in just figuring out how to get all of your people working from home. That was collaboration software, remote access, a lot of technical infrastructure, security, all of those things you weren't planning on doing that suddenly became an absolute requirement months ago. Now, Taiwan has been very lucky compared to many parts of the world, but those of you running global operations, whether it's in Europe or whether it was down in Australia, New Zealand, or whether you were up even in Japan or Korea, or in the United States, where we're suffering very hard with the coronavirus still. So if you're global, you've had more challenges in this area to work with. And then stabilizing, getting those core systems and operations to be able to work in a prioritized environment. Very, very challenging. And then thriving. How are you supporting the business and the changes needed to make sure that the company can grow inside this environment? So the CIO is at the center of all of this technological change and changed priorities from what any of us were expecting a year ago. Which leads us to another very important factor. You must be honest with yourself about prioritizing everything. Those of us who have gone through the downturns of 2001 and 2007, one of the biggest mistakes that was made was failure to look at everything, and failure to look at everything in an appropriate time frame. We call it a falling knife. And that's when you make too few cuts or too few changes, and then things happen faster than you can keep up. The truth, for anyone who's been through downturned economies, they understand. Revenues will shrink faster than you can cut expenses. And that is a risk to your business, a deadly risk to many businesses. So what you need to do is get in front of it with bold moves that are bigger than where you are at the time today, estimating that you will fall behind if you're not ahead of it. And you must be honest with every single project, everything you're spending money on, you have to look at. And you have to ask these very important questions. They're tough questions, but you must ask it of every single initiative in order to make sure that you are looking and making the right calls on every spend line item. Otherwise, you could risk your entire business if you don't do this. Now, one of the ways that I recommend that leaders take a look at their expenses. Where do I start? How do I figure out where to go with these various expenses? I take a look and I try to divide them up into recommended 4 segments. I would start with infrastructure and compliance. I would have innovation and differentiation. I would have productivity and cost management, and I would have enterprise software foundation. I would look at all my costs, put them in each of these categories. Infrastructure and compliance is required. You have to do it. Innovation and differentiation, this is where we have to thrive. So we have to make these investments. These are important. Productivity and cost management, we have to stop the bleeding. We can't expend more money than we're bringing in our new cash model. And then there's enterprise software foundation, where we see a lot of people who are planning on upgrades and migrating to new products that were very expensive, very time-consuming, labor-intensive projects, but often have very, very little in terms of return on investment. We have customers who, for example, are putting off new financial systems, new HR systems. Why? Because they're not competitive advantages. They're not going to help the company grow. They're not going to help you compete in the marketplace. And they're not going to help you differentiate and innovate your business. So that's an area where we see a lot of savings. That's an area, again, where Rimini Street spends a lot of its focus, is helping customers avoid those costly, unnecessary ERP and HR system upgrades and migrations that the vendors are trying to push, but have very little real value day to day. Those types of costs can be put off for years, allowing you to reinvest that money, the time, the resources of the company back into other areas of the business. Now, the way that we approach with customers is to really take a look, and I ask you all to think about your difference between your day-to-day operating spend and what you spend on investments and enhancements that support competitive advantage and growth, that create business transformation. The truth is that most customers spend up to 90% of their budget, their IT budget, running day-to-day operations, paying for maintenance, paying for all the day-to-day service contracts to keep the systems running. And that equation only leaves about 10% for business transformation. It is simply not enough. 10% of your IT budget for business transformation will not allow you to compete effectively against your competitors. Now, what we recommend is taking a bunch of different steps, 5 in particular, that can help you reduce the ongoing operations and enhancements, take that down to potentially 60% of your budget, and leaving you 40% of your IT budget for business transformation. That is a winning strategy. This is what we work on with customers all day long, is working with executive teams to make this kind of budgetary transition that allows them to invest in new parts of their business and innovation without increasing the overall spend of the IT organization. And in fact, what you want to do is focus on 5 particular pillars. And I'm going to show you what those are. And these are my recommendation to make sure that you achieve that reduction of 90% to 60% of daily operating costs. Now, the first one is reducing your total software support and operating costs. Whether it's Rimini Street or another company that can come in and offer better support at a lower cost on your Oracle, your SAP, or other software products in the enterprise suite, you can save over 50% in the annual service cost alone and a total of 90% total operating costs by a switch to using independent maintenance from the vendors. Now, this allows you to extend the life of those products and further reduce any costs associated with upgrades and updates that are required by the software vendor. The second item we would recommend is look at a more effective application management strategy with better outcomes. If you're using an AMS or an AMO provider today, are you getting good value out of that spend? Are you getting the kind of outcomes that you expect? Improved services, improved system availability, improved reliability, happier users, more productivity? Are you getting those answers? If not, you should look at making a change to your application management vendor. Or if you're not using a vendor, could you potentially bring in an AMS provider and repurpose your staff to provide projects and work that's more beneficial to the company than you working on these enterprise systems all day long? Third, look at the leveraging of public cloud. I know public cloud has had certain amounts of uptake and popularity, probably more in the US and the West, but it's now growing rapidly throughout Asia. If you're still in an old data center that's very costly, you should consider moving to the public cloud. And I mean moving your software in a lift and shift into a public cloud environment. So you're running the same software, but on an AWS or an Azure or a Google Cloud environment. We believe we could substantially lower your overall operating costs, improve performance of that software for your users, and improve security at the same time, where cloud security now is better than most people have in their own data center. And you can avoid all the costs of rebuilding that data center with new hardware because your data center hardware is aging. Now, fourth, taking a look at managing that public cloud. Just because you use the public cloud doesn't mean you're managing it well from a cost perspective. It requires a special type of tuning and management on a continual basis to reduce the maximum amount of cost and bring the maximum amount of savings back into your budget. And this can be substantial. A lot of the cloud companies make a good amount of money off customers who don't know how to tune their cloud or don't tune it regularly to make sure that they're getting maximum savings and value out of that cloud environment. And lastly, in the 5 pillars, optimize your software licenses. This is something you should hire someone to come in and help you, a professional, especially if you're running SAP where there are many different types of licenses. But we find that customers often are not optimized in the usage of the right licenses for the right people, and that can cost you a substantial amount of money. So we believe if you do all 5 of these things, you could substantially lower your daily operating costs in the IT budget and free up capital for big investments that drive innovation and allow you to compete more effectively in the marketplace, where you're able to move from survive to stabilize and ultimately thrive in any of these environments and challenges that we have today. Now, one last note that I wanted to give you was Rimini Street is very, very active in the community all over the world, including Taiwan. And we understand not only the challenges of COVID, which we know is not as hard hit in Taiwan, but the economic impacts have been global. And we've been there in the Taiwanese market, as well as all the other countries that we service. And our foundation, which is funded by Rimini Street, works in these communities. This is just an example of where we're working with children with autism in the Taiwanese market, many other projects that we're working on. And we just want you to understand how important it is for us to be part of the Taiwanese community. And please, if you get a chance, do check our website. You'll enjoy it. It'll fill your heart with joy to see the help that we're deploying. And I want to thank all of you and wish you well in your business and staying safe and healthy. And I look forward to being in front of all of you in person at a later date. If we can be of assistance to help your company through any of these challenges, please call on our local team, call on me. We'd be happy to help you and share our advice and counsel. Thank you very much and have a good day.